Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Integrated Marketing 2020. My name is Fiona, and I'll be facilitating today. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. The webinar will last for approximately 45 to 50 minutes. All attendees are on mute, so the only voices you should hear throughout the webinar will be mine and the presenters. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the chat box of the control panel. You can send in your questions at any time during the presentation, and we'll collect these and address as many as we can during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. I'd now like to introduce Dave Chaffey, so over to you, Dave.
Thank you, Fiona, and hello, everyone. Well, I'm looking forward to looking into the future at 2020. It's getting close now, and many businesses have been running marketing or digital transformation projects so they can compete in the future. And that's really what we're looking at today, is how can you change your marketing practices and processes to compete better. And I'll be looking at 10 different areas to consider to review what you can do differently. Now, when we look at the future, even the current time, what digital marketing has given us and multi-channel marketing is a lot more opportunities to communicate through social, search, affiliates, and all these online channels. So it depends whether you see it as an opportunity or a threat. But I know as a consultant and a trainer working with many businesses that a lot of these opportunities haven't been tapped into, and often where they have, people may be effective at using search or email marketing, perhaps social media, but they're not integrating those activities together. And I think often the bigger the organisation, the harder that is to get that integration. But I also hope today will work for smaller businesses as well, where they can where you might have a marketing team of just one or two, but you still have to look at this practical issue of how you integrate these activities through the customer journey you can see here. So let's have a look at some of the opportunities I often see as I'm working on projects with clients which are missed. And an obvious one is that the world has changed, I think, and marketers need to change too from a campaign mindset where you might have monthly or quarterly campaigns around particular topics or promotions, but now customers are continuously looking for products and services or to engage with content online. So if you're not effective in search marketing on a continuous basis, you are going to miss out. Then on our websites or in our mobile apps and social media, there's a great opportunity for encouraging interactions, but really online marketing is very tough. Many visitors will bounce off your website on the first page if you don't have the right content and customer journeys in place. So we're having to look not just at communications, but the experience as a whole. And if you don't provide that persuasive, easy to use experience, then customers are going to go elsewhere. Of course, with our new technologies and with techniques like big data, marketing automation, we've got a lot better opportunities for getting inside the mind of our prospects and customers and delivering more relevant comms, but only if we are deploying the technology in the right way. So these are all the challenges that I think we need to think of as we plan for the future. We mentioned there content, which content marketing is probably one of the biggest trends in marketing of the last 3 to 5 years, but it's become so popular that getting engagement is now a challenge, and exactly how you manage that is a source of competitive advantage. And then, of course, with content, it's not just the creation and design of the content, it's how you compete to share that content with all the other platforms. And influencer outreach is now much more important for all types of companies to get that engagement too. Next we have marketing automation, using those platforms for email marketing in particular, or on-site web personalization, we already know some of the leading retailers are using these techniques, but what about other sectors? I'll be looking at how we can use these techniques there. Then just to complete the picture, we've got customer service, mustn't be neglected, and of course understanding from experience through running techniques such as Net Promoter Score to really nail the defects in the customer journeys and the content. And then last but certainly not means least, social media. So consider those across your own marketing and think which you see as perhaps the biggest opportunities, or if you like, the biggest defects. So that was by way of an introduction. Let's now look at how we'll cover the topics. Do a quick intro poll in a moment and introduce myself, but the main bulk of the talk is just to give you these 10 areas in your marketing to consider, and we've split that out into the 5 pillars, which, if you like, are the foundations that you need to build for 2020, and then in the second part, 5 specific techniques of integration with examples of those to keep it nice and practical for you. And then, as Fiona said, at the end we have 10-15 minutes or so for questions, so do ask those. So to introduce myself, if you have met or heard of me, it may well be through my books, which are used often for studying marketing today. They're actually, I think that top one was originally known as Internet Marketing, and it was published in 2001, believe it or not. So that's on its 5th edition, and in fact just yesterday I heard from another publisher that another book, Digital Marketing Excellence, I've written with PR Smith, we've just released the 5th edition of that as well. But these books are only updated periodically, and really my passion is understanding what's happening on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, and looking to alert marketers to the techniques they should be considering that are working best. And to do that, I'm very fortunate in my day job, if you like, to run SmartInsights, which is an education platform for marketers, where we provide templates and guides to help marketers create plans and action plans, campaign plans for marketing. And we cover all of these 10 areas. We focus on integrated digital marketing. So whether it's the overall plan, search or content, we have resources to help there. And as you can see, we've built a large audience of, we get around 1 1/3 page views a month now. So I'm not just giving theory, this is the practice that's working for us as well. And we've been fortunate enough to attract a lot of well-known brands to work with to help with their marketing. But actually the processes we use, the RACE framework, is often applicable to smaller businesses too. So that's a little about me. I'd like to know a bit about you now, if I may, and to understand how your challenge with integration, whether you're on top of it or how big a challenge you see. So Fiona's going to ask the question now, and I'd like you to rate yourself between 1 and 5, where 5 is a good level of integration and you're optimizing communications, whereas 1, where you've really got separate communications, they're not well integrated between digital and traditional marketing. So if you could choose, it would be interesting to see where most people lie, whether most are above or below that average of 3 there. So just waiting for the responses to be shared now. Okay, so interesting. Thanks for voting. I think the average shows that people are. It's a big challenge essentially. So most people have said limited integration. That's actually half of you who've who voted. And at that very top stage of optimizing or fully integrated, we've got less than 10%, which is what we would expect on a call where you're looking to learn about it. So let's get on now. Thanks for voting. Let's get on now to look at some of these techniques to help you move up this ladder of integration. We actually asked a similar question for the Technology for Marketing conference, and this again shows if you feel you are limited, you're not alone. There are many people actually actively working on this. So a good starting point, I would say, is to review, to benchmark your integration on these levels, and then you can say this is where we are now, this is where we need to get to in future. And on SmartInsights, we've got a series of free benchmarking templates to help you do that. So let's go to the top end now, and let's see what an example of integration. You may remember from a few years back the O2 Be More Dog, that high impact campaign, which was cats and dogs, everyone loves pets, and it was nicely integrated across all media, whether that was at cinemas, on TV, and then going through to the web experience you can see here again. So this is O2's latest. You may have seen I don't know if it's an Easter rabbit. It's probably due to last a bit longer than that. But what's interesting about this one is that it's not really looking at online integration as the main focus, but it's actually about event marketing, real-world events for participation. So if you're not aware of that one, it's interesting to check out. So you can see it's music, entertainment, sports. So we're certainly not saying that digital marketing is going to dominate, and often if you can get these offline interactions, that's going to be more effective. Then we've got some other examples where brands have managed to get cut through. The Coke personalization, Share a Coke, was very much facilitated by digital and social media in particular. You might remember that one from a couple of years back. And then we have the ongoing Meerkat. Those of you in the UK will know that, believe it or not, this is around a mortgage provider, so comparing financial services, but they've probably got the best brand recognition through using this as a sustained approach on TV and digital as well. So there's some examples we can aspire to. Let's just take a bit of time out now to think of this perhaps for those of you studying marketing qual at the moment. So what is integration? And I've always been a big fan of the Picton and Broderick Integrated Comms Guide, and they talk about the 4 C's, where what we would often think of as consistency, coherence, complementary activities. And I think those are a great way to think, but often we perhaps oversimplify. And for me, this is a minimum you should be trying to achieve to have consistent, recognizable, high impact comms across different channels. I think where we get more powerful with our integrated comms are where we look at the 4 S's and the 4 E's. So by synergistic and symbiotic, we're looking at how different media can support each other. And I'll show you some examples later where, for example, we see that if we can integrate our Facebook advertising via social media with our email and use them in a combined way, that's actually more effective in terms of reach and conversion. And similarly, if you were thinking about offline TV or print campaigns, they work much better when they're integrated with search and social media marketing as well. The 4 E's are really reminding us about why we're doing this and putting in place the right measures to see which channels are most effective. And certainly how you measure is one of my passions and something we all need to get right. It's a bit out of the scope of today, but what I would recommend is that you have tracking within Google Analytics or Adobe, whatever you're using. You can see the revenue or goal value per visit from the different channels, what they're contributing. We also need to think today about smartphone and desktop. I've just updated on SmartInsights today, actually, a new article from Criteo looking at their research, and we can see the top 10 countries in terms of mobile purchase, and we've just reached this tipping point where in the UK and Japan, these are the only countries now where smartphone purchases actually exceed desktop. And if you're internationally marketing, you'll see quite a lot of cultural differences. So in, say, Germany and France, the figure's down at 35% or so, and in France and Italy, it's below 30%. So the techniques you use will have to vary quite a lot based on culture and adoption of these technologies. Integrating your platforms, web and email, we'll talk about in a moment. That's often something that isn't done, I find, in practice. People are sending out emails with an email service provider, but they're not really able to see on the website which people have interacted, and so do follow up in the way that someone like Amazon might. And then retargeting is another powerful technique where we can see someone's visited a particular page and get that synergy or symbiosis, as it says here, by reminding them of the message or the products that they're interested in. And Criteo is one of the technology providers there. And then, of course, we can remind visitors to our own sites if they've previously visited a relevant offer. And one of the things I think that's amazed me over the nearly 20 years I've been involved in marketing now and online marketing is how retailers and perhaps other sectors like financial services or travel, they're good at personalization, but a lot of other types of businesses, which are very common in number, they're not really making use of these opportunities to use the techniques you might see on retailers like John Lewis or Harrods or any of the grocery companies like Tesco and Waitrose. So next up, I'd like to give you a practical tool, and I'm conscious whenever I'm training, I find it's almost half the people in the audience, the marketers, are actually business to business. So I wanted to include a B2B example here as well. And here, of course, it's about generating leads via our website and then nurturing them so that they become marketing qualified leads. So what I would suggest if you're in B2B, and you can use a similar technique in consumer markets too, is that you actually map out all of the touch points that your prospects and customers might go through time, and then see which of these techniques you're using or rate them in terms of how effective they are in getting results and responses for you. So the sort of thing you might do is you might be using content marketing, social media, so you've got those set up, but there's some other techniques that you're not using so well. If you search on SmartInsights under lifecycle marketing, there's more discussion of this, but you can see as I flip between these two slides here, we're doing a sort of gap analysis of what's possible and what's missing. So in terms of content, something that I see quite often is that marketers have good content perhaps for generating initial lead, so we'd call this top of funnel content, TOFU, where FU is short for funnel, but they're missing out on nurturing content which is further down the funnel, which is effective, or at least getting that content in front of people. So you can see here in the convert stage of race, we've got MOFU, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, and you could even talk about engagement retention in the funnel to get your existing customers to share content which can be used to reach new prospects. So that's one example of how you could use this gap analysis. Another one might be, I mentioned this idea of retargeting, where you can use Google to display ads, Facebook and Twitter as well, LinkedIn if you're B2B, but many marketers aren't doing that, and I think it's often because there's a campaign mindset and there hasn't been a project set up to review all these opportunities of what we might call continuous rather than campaign marketing. Okay, let's go through the 5 pillars then I mentioned, which I think need to be in place to compete in 2020. So we'll spend 2 or 3 slides looking at each one of these, and of course we start with audience and insight. Always a good place to start to plan for the future. Now, I was mentioning already around the importance of mobile and of course smartphone in particular for e-commerce. If you're one of those on the webinar today who's studying based in the UK or even internationally, I'd recommend the Ofcom Communications Market Reports. What they do at every September, every December is they compare social media and device adoption by country. So it's a really good quality research. And as you'd expect, you can see the smartphone there stepping up year on year, and laptop, desktop falling away. What I wanted to do was to be a bit contrarian here, because I think a lot of commentators have looked at this and they're talking about a mobile-first approach. But this is actually showing that although laptop and desktop are in decline, that doesn't mean they're not important. And I'll show you what I mean by that in a moment. It's a mistake to say mobile-first strategy for many companies. This is this data point I mentioned earlier about percentage of retail transactions, where UK and Japan, you can now see it's over 50%. So yeah, this is the danger of the mobile-first approach, which I think it was Eric Schmidt of Google. He really started this buzzword of mobile first, but I think a much more sensible way to plan is to think of a multi-platform or a multi-channel majority, and this is what the panel data here from ComScore shows, that it's the majority of people use their smartphone and perhaps their tablet as well alongside the desktop, depending on the type of activity they're selecting. So if you're, say, choosing a holiday, it's unlikely that you're going to go through that whole buying process just on your smartphone, maybe for a weekend break. But if you're doing a long-haul trip that's going to cost a lot of cash, you're going to research it on desktop and probably go to a branch as well. So multi-platform is the way to think. And what this means is that from a measurement perspective, it's really important to see the influence of smartphone, desktop, and then the individual channels within that. And a technique which is important is, again, outside the scope of today, but if you're not looking at attribution of which channels are prompting sale across those complex journeys, then you're probably not able to really see which communications are working for you and how they're working in an integrated sense. So if we think about the channels that are available to us, it's certainly much more complicated than it was 20 years ago, or even 10 or 5 years ago. One of our commentators on SmartInsights, David Seeley, who he's a consultant, he's actually worked through and developed a list, I think, of 130 different marketing channels you could potentially use, which is very difficult to actually plan against that complexity. So what we've done with SmartInsights in the resources here is to identify these 8 techniques that we think should be part of your communications plans with respect to digital marketing, and with the experience there at the centre. So if you're creating a plan, a campaign plan, you should consider all of these and how they fit together. And what I'd say is, to simplify it further, what's often useful is to think, rather than having a separate you hear people talking about, oh, our social media strategy, our search strategy, our content strategy. For me, you should bring those together and have an integrated customer engagement strategy, which is based mainly around the content, which we were looking at with regards to the life cycle, the funnel, and then that allows you to bring those communications together, so they're all supporting content for your communications goals. So, time for another poll now, I think, and yeah, since we're looking at these channels, it's obviously important to get your investment levels right in the different channels. So I was just interested to know which are most important for you. It's going to vary by sector, size of company, maturity, but I think often the balance of investment is not quite right. So it'll be interesting to see which is affecting overall leads or sales. Okay, I'll pop back to that in a moment. So I've got a separate piece of research showing for retailers the channels that are important. But let's have a look at the survey votes. Again, thank you for voting. That's great. What can we see now? So yeah, two clear winners, I would say. Organic search is in second, and then we have email marketing top. Oh, no, it's just updated, so they're around equal. And everything else is quite a way behind with AdWords about half the level, and then paid and social about the same. So as we would expect, it varies a lot across sector. So yeah, that slide I was looking at before there, just to allow you to compare. This is actually US data, because I haven't seen this available publicly in the UK or elsewhere, but it's across the very largest US retailers, so it's quite representative of what's driving sales online for these businesses. And very similar to what you were voting there, we're seeing that organic search and CPC, which is the paid search, actually you said a bit lower on that, and email, these are the three most important channels. And then of course in the retail sector, affiliate marketing, which I didn't ask you about, where you'd have other sites referring traffic, that's quite high as well. So that shows the importance of forming partnerships online with complementary businesses to drive reach and sales. So perhaps no surprises there about what is top. I think I was a little surprised, since email isn't new, why that's actually the largest one. But if you think now for retailer, email is an acquisition channel. If you visit a retail site as a first-time visitor, you'll see a prompt to sign up for perhaps your first 10% off your first purchase, and that requires you to provide an email address, and email fulfills that offer. So retailers are using emails to drive initial sale, and then of course it's very important for prompting sales from existing customers as well. So perhaps no surprise there. What is a surprise, I think, is if you look at display and social, which a fair few of you did mention those are actually sub 2% here. And that really, I wanted to show this to beg this question: are you spending enough time on these other core channels, or what is the reason why these are relatively low? Now, I would say this is actually a last click presentation of the data, so it may be that display and social, for initial awareness of these retail brands, is important in that sense. So it does remind us that we need to look at attribution to see the whole story. But I think it's certainly interesting how low those are in retail, although it will vary by category. I'm sure it's higher for fashion retail, for example. So let's look at how we can provide some focus then, and I mentioned earlier that the way I see it, having a focus on content marketing and a hub of content resources that you can use to explain your proposition, to guide people through the purchase journey, that's really crucial to competition. Often when I'm training, I'll look at the laser eye surgery market, and if you search on that term, you'll see very often the company that's ranking top isn't the one that is, it's not a product page, but it's actually a complete guide to how you select laser eye treatment and the risks, how you evaluate a good provider. So the companies in that sector with the best visibility are the ones where they've really thought through the different types of content and how it's distributed and available on the website there. So looking more generally, what I would say is to make the most of all of the opportunities, take a look at the whole touch points across the life cycle. We've got our race framework on SmartInsights to help our members review that, and then audit these to see how effective and efficient they are in terms of getting conversion for you. Often when I start working with a company, they don't really have the analytics customized for their business in place to be able to say what's working well, what's not working, what do we need to improve. But using a structured audit framework like this is a way to help, and that's how we help our members. Okay. Another pillar then is technology, and this is another area of complexity. I don't know whether you've seen this, I can only call it crazy, chart created by a chap called Scott Brinker over in the US, where he's catalogued all of the marketing technologies, so vendors of different platforms for doing your marketing. I know Scott well. I've met him at the Martech Europe conference, and I think it's great for flagging up the challenge of how do we manage technology to support this integration. But clearly, if you've got this many data sources, this many different vendors in your Martech stack, as it's called, it's going to be difficult to achieve integration. So I think it raises questions of, can we have a best of breed solution, a cloud solution that covers many of these, or do we, best of breed or cloud? So what we've done, for us to have another way of sort of breaking this out to think about the right types of integration for targeting and personalization, as we mentioned earlier. What I've been thinking through with our team is, if I was trying to simplify those 3,500 icons on the Scott Brinker chart, how would I do that? And use the power of technology across all the touch points. So what you'll see here, I'll just expand it. You can actually download this if you, it's a free download from this bit.ly link, Smart Digital Tools. But what we've tried to do here is to say, if we looked at the whole customer's life cycle, so this is reach in the top, how do we reach our audience in the top right, or in the top left, how do we engage existing customers? What are the different techniques to do that? And we've identified 30, and it's still a lot, it's still complicated, but I would say that even a small business like SmartInsights, we use a lot of these techniques ourselves to achieve better integration and to manage the detail, because if you've got this detailed focus on customer insight, then you will be able to optimize those touch points and do a better job than your competitors, provide a better experience. So to take just a couple of examples, under the reach area, you can see here we've got site audience comparison. Many of these tools are actually free and you can use to support your assignments or projects if you're doing those. So SimilarWeb, Alexa, Google's got its own benchmarking. Digital analytics, of course, Google Analytics is good. Keyword analysis, the Google Keyword Planner. So the way we've structured this is we've tried to put around the outside edge the most popular or the cost-effective or even free tools, and then more enterprise, more sophisticated tools tend to be towards the center. So if you're interested to review your Martech stack, I'd say download this chart and just tick off which of these 30 categories you use. Of course, what's becoming much more popular for integration are these marketing cloud service providers here. You can see in the top left, or the email providers. So when we review what we've got, we don't have 30 tools. We've got probably these 10 core tools, and the ones I'd recommend, perhaps some of the less well-known ones to understand search. Majestic we find very good for our conversion optimization, convert.com and Hotjar. HelloBar for delivering personalized messages. We use those, and they're all relatively low cost. And then for the internal comms, we use these ones on the right. I'm sure many of you will use as well. A great Slack's great for sharing ideas and getting the process to work. So we talked at the top level about marketing platforms such as search, social, email. Within that, of course, there's a lot of complexity also that needs to be managed. And I think by 2020, the thing to think about is getting everyone in the organization, the marketing organization, skilled up in these specific tools, but then having some specialists who keep on top of the very latest changes. So, for instance, on SmartInsights today, we've just covered a new feature that Google's announced this week called dynamic search ads. So what many businesses are doing, larger businesses, is setting up a marketing center of excellence or a digital center of excellence to be on top of all this complexity, but then you have a basic level of competence of the digital channels amongst everyone else. And of course, you can see here from Facebook and Moz how these are changing almost daily in terms of some of these channels you need for your competitive advantage. Now, at SmartInsights, we like to have Minds tools to help marketers review their approach, and this is a technique I'd really recommend, where you plot effectiveness on the x-axis against the cost, as with the cost effectiveness falling at the top, and then you try and find this sweet spot, which is the bottom right, of the communications tools that really work for you. So that's the 70%, and then the 20% are trying to optimize the ones that aren't bottom right, and then the 10% is to leave time and budget available, ring-fence resource, so that you can actually test some of these new techniques I've been talking about. So the final one of our pillars is thinking about your whole process for review. And of course, annual planning and campaign planning are common within marketing, but these days I think everything's changing so fast that you do need a quarterly, what we call a 90-day planning system, just continuously review the opportunity from new techniques to develop an overall strategy, and then to manage the updates to the experience or to your email marketing or some of your traditional comms. So the best way to get started if you're kicking off one of these transformation projects is to, as I showed you earlier, review where you're at now in terms of resources, goals, process, strategy, data, and then at the bottom, your actual delivery of comms and experience. So in the last 5-10 minutes or so, we're just going to have a quick run through some of the more practical techniques, and we've summarized these in an article on SmartInsights you can access, just to give a bit more different flavor to what we're covering today, again focused on 2020. So to reiterate what we said earlier, having this always-on visibility in search marketing is so important when you can see the volume of audience and how that varies seasonally. So with this example of laser eye treatment, if you're not using a tool like the keyword planner, you might not know that, in fact, you get 10 times as many people searching for laser eye surgery rather than laser eye treatment. So you know where you need to focus and to develop a keyword plan to get visibility. Now, I call this always on or continuous marketing. Another way of thinking about this, Gartner have called this two-step, two-speed marketing. So you might want to follow up this article here. So it's really blending the continuous and the campaign activities together. They've got this nice analogy of gears, cogs in motion. And then to reiterate what I said earlier, look at your touch points across the whole life cycle. You get the analytics in place. You can really see the value that each of these channels is delivering to you. Use techniques like attribution to understand what's the best balance for you. And use the insights that's available. Facebook have really improved the insight that's available on their platform. Fascinating, really, to see that they're actually comparing here on the left Facebook with a TV audience, and you can see, particularly with the younger generation using TV less and more likely to use Facebook and other social media, we can actually reach at scale certain demographics very well now through social media. But often the two techniques will work best together. They've got other research that shows that. And I think YouTube would be another example in the news at the moment, because brands are seeing their ads where they wouldn't like to be displayed in extremist sites, but the reason they're advertising on Google and YouTube is really to supplement their TV ads. We have to think, if we're optimizing and taking our integration seriously, we have to look at getting the right effective reach as well, which is not just whether we're using display or using Google AdWords, but how many times are our messages reaching an individual. Often, if your message is only being displayed once, in terms of frequency, it's not going to have the impact. Often the sweet spot, traditionally we used to say 4. This research from Facebook shows that, I think here it's actually weekly, so it shows that you should be aiming for your ads to be displayed at least twice a week, and possibly over a longer period as well. This is an example of integration in practice here. So the power of combining both email together with Facebook. So if you're thinking about people are on your list either as customers or prospects, if you're able to reach those people by both ads and Facebook, you're going to get, email and Facebook ads, you're going to get an improved reach in terms of the frequency, and then also that's going to affect the purchase intent. So where people saw both here, they were a fifth more likely to purchase. So before we go to questions, I just wanted to cover off, we said 2020, so I thought we should look a bit further into the future at how more sophisticated techniques like AI, and one of these techniques is programmatic advertising, where we're using machines to bid for ads. We can see here the Daily Mail using this because the bar on the right, the plug-in there, shows how many different programmatic ad networks are bidding to reach an individual as they're viewing the media site online. And you can see we're going to have to really improve our skills in terms of, well, we can either treat machine learning and AI as a black box and just say, let's hope it works, or we'll have to improve our skills so we can think about the bidding strategies and the options within the machine learning, because I think very often you'll need specialists to work alongside the machine learning. But certainly this data here from Agile shows the increased use of programmatic through time, particularly on social media ads. We're seeing relatively few, or certainly below half, using programmatic on video and display. So we can expect that will grow by 2020, and that's a skill you should have in place. Now, I've been thinking through with my team the options for using machine learning, because often AI is presented as a sort of all-powerful solution, but not that practical. So what I'd recommend, if you want to learn more about this and get your business and yourself prepared, is to focus in particular on how machine learning and predictive analytics can support your marketing for better integrated, better targeted messages. And this is a project we've been doing for our marketing automation. Machine learning essentially looks at the historical pattern of response and interaction with your content and messaging, and then makes future recommendations based on rules that are identified automatically. In this case, we're seeing likelihood, propensity to convert. So I think we've got time for one more poll before we finish in 5 minutes or so. And one of the last topics we're going to look at, haven't talked so much about the website, but how often do you test, learn, improve using the website? As this graphic shows, very often we've got quite big gaps between our redesign, and we're not using this sort of evolutionary approach where we might be running A/B testing. So for your last vote, please, I'd like you to say whether you're using this approach of might be testing 2 different versions of a landing page, maybe for the home page, different variations for different ways of presenting your proposition. So what I'm particularly interested to see is how many businesses are running on a continuous basis. This is what we would try and do, where on SmartInsights we have perhaps 4 ads test live at in any given month, and that's what this retailer here is doing as well. You can see the number of tests that they're running. But I'll just take a quick look at the results. A clear winner or loser, if you like, that because of other time pressures to run campaigns, to plan, we're seeing that nearly 60% have answered A here, and they're not doing the sort of tests that you can do. But I would say that's a good ambition to have those continuous tests in place by 2020. And kudos to those of you who said C, because you're running those tests continuously. Just a quick example of the power of these tests. We did a very simple test around adding new contacts to our list, and all we did actually, if you look at the creative here, is we added some social proof, some comments about our content, and just by adding those 3 lines to the bottom of this that light box, that increased our sign-up rate by 10%, which across all the visits made a big difference to us. So my final point is around the long-term planning. We've looked at a lot of tactics that you can use, but clearly they need to be scheduled in. You need the resource for them. So to be ready for 2020 and to compete at that time, having this sort of planning approach, this long-term roadmap is going to be important. And what many businesses are doing now, this is actually recommended by Accenture, is developing this digital centre of excellence or marketing centre of excellence, so this approach can be managed in a controlled way. So that's us at 50 minutes, which is hopefully as advertised. I do hope you found that useful. I look forward to your questions now. If there's any we don't have time to cover, do feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to answer your questions there, and I also have updates about what I see as the most important new features and techniques that we're seeing coming through. So thanks for listening.
Great, thanks very much, Dave. We've got a few questions to start with. We've got one from Marco. Do you have any suggestions or recommendations which relate to improving integrated marketing for charities, not-for-profits, and government programs or service providers?
Okay, thanks for the question, Marco. So for not-for-profits and the government, I think a lot of the principles are similar, and a lot of the techniques that I've used would work well. So the tactics where we've talked about using social media alongside your email marketing. I know a lot of charities have good email programs that will work well. Retargeting is a technique which really you can apply across industries. So if someone, with retargeting, you could say, well, anyone who has visited our site will do a follow-up message or reminder to support us as a charity. But what you could do is to view someone, only serve those messages when someone's engaged with a particular campaign. So if it was a charity, a campaigning organisation like Greenpeace or Amnesty, where someone has engaged with a particular campaign, as part of that campaign planning, you could have a reminder specific for that campaign to get someone to take the next step. So I hope that's helpful. We do have a lot of charity, not-for-profit examples on SmartInsights, so you could check there as well.
Great, thank you. We've got a question from Naomi. How might the recent trust issues around programmatic advertising impact future planning?
Yes, interesting, very topical question there, Naomi. Thank you for that. So, yeah, you can't have failed to have heard of this, and maybe not if you're not based in the UK. So this is where Google ads have been shown on extremist sites, or if they're display network sites, or perhaps on YouTube, brands ads have been displayed on extremist videos. So to be honest, I don't see this as a new issue. I remember very similar furore 10 years ago when banner ads were being displayed on hate sites. So it's certainly not morally acceptable, I think, what's happening now. But I'm sure with the pressure that's been applied, and this started in the UK, but I've now seen that some US advertisers are starting to pull ads from Google as well. And I think Google are good at listening, particularly when it affects their shareholder value. So I don't think it's a planning issue, but for you as a marketer, if your ads were to be seen now, let's say on extremist sites, then that's going to make you look bad, particularly if your boss or colleagues find out about this and you're the person responsible for that. So for the individual marketer running campaigns, I think what's very important is to exclude some of these sites and to be much more controlled about where your ads are displayed on the display network or on YouTube. And there are some controls already. So it's a case of working with agencies as part of the campaign planning process to look at the risk of your ads being displayed. So try and set up a white list of sites which are acceptable, and of course have a sort of risk management process that if it does go wrong, which can still happen, you can quickly pull your ads. So I hope that helps, but I hope it will be less of a problem by 2020 than it is right now.
Great, thank you. We've had a couple of questions about GDPR. Do you think that GDPR is going to have a big impact on marketing over the next year?
That is a very interesting question, and in my view, it very much depends on the impacts, how GDPR and compliance is viewed within a particular company. It's really a case of risk v reward. The best way to think about this is that there's been previous EU prompted privacy initiatives. So the Privacy and Electronic Communications Regulations in 2003 was really a similar scale initiative to the GDPR, and that prompted people to take data collection much more seriously, ensure unsubscribe was always an option which was acted on in emails. So my personal view is it shouldn't make too much of a difference because most companies are already practicing the PECR initiatives. I think where it gets more difficult to say is if GDPR is interpreted differently in different European countries. So if you're marketing in Germany, for example, their laws on cookie use, specific laws of the overall EU may be more specific. So if you've got international markets, that's where you have to be more careful. So it's going to be interesting to see. We'll see how different sectors interpret it. In the past, for example, you'll see a lot of sites now give privacy warnings where it will pop up a box saying, click OK before you can proceed. That approach isn't used very much by retailers because they believe that it's actually unnecessary through their reading of the law, and it will negatively affect their sales. So they haven't got those prompts, but in another industry like travel or financial services, they might decide they need to. So it's a call that should be taken by every business with legal advice, but look at what's acceptable within your company.
Great, thank you. We've got time for one more question. Where do you think we can learn more on programmatic advertising looking ahead, as programmatic will be very much in demand by 2020?
Yeah, I think that's a great area to get skilled up in. And I think probably the best place is a lot of the vendors. They're good at content marketing. So I mentioned in my talk, AdRoll. That's actually a solution we use for our Facebook retargeting. They've also got a prospecting tool, so AdRoll. Rocket Fuel is another programmatic provider that's got good content explaining this. So some of the specialist media sites are helpful as well, like DigiDay. So a few ideas for you there. I'd say I'm not sure to be honest, but I think often training courses, one-day training courses, I'm not sure whether they just cover programmatic, but it would be maybe nice to see more specialist courses on programmatic and machine learning coming out between now and 2020, so people can get skilled up. So I think that must be the final answer. So I'll just say thanks for all the questions and interactions via the poll, and thank you to Fiona for fielding the questions. All the best for your marketing by 2020.
Thanks very much, Dave. And thank you, everybody, for attending today's webinar, Integrated Marketing 2020. Once you leave today's webinar, you'll receive a survey on the presentation, and we'd really appreciate it if you could complete that and provide your feedback. You'll also receive a follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. On behalf of CIM and Dave Chaffey, thank you for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Okay, great.